Well, Mark, I think one of the things that I like most about your book is not just the hope in the title or the things that you've learned from the poor, but the stories that you tell. You really feel like you get to know the people that you've met. So tell us one of your favorite stories that shows how the working poor can take a small loan and make it into something incredible that provides for their family.
It's like asking me which of my children do I like the best. But one of the people that I met was this gentleman, Szechuan, in Indonesia. He had been transmigrated by the government to this virgin jungle area because they were congested in the cities. And so they gave him a one-way ticket to several thousand miles away and a little 5-acre plot of land. So he started this little farm, grew some coconut trees and a few goats and things, but could barely sustain his family of 5. And so when Opportunity International came there, he was one of the first people who received a loan from us. He took a $500 loan, bought some hose and shovels, and hired 35 people to divert a stream, and he dug out these little fish ponds and then stocked them with carp. That was basically his little enterprise. And today he's harvesting about 100 pounds of carp a day. About a year later, he came back and took out a second loan for $1,000, and this time he built little chicken coops about 6 inches above the water surface, and the floor of the chicken coops were in slats, and so the chickens would drop, their droppings would go between these slats and then feed the fish. And so what he used to spend on fish food, he now spent on chicken feed and feed chicken.
He's got his own little circle of life going there.
He does. Somebody cue the Lion King.
That's innovative. I love it. Wow.
So many times you'll hear folks going on like short-term missions trips and they feel like they're taking Jesus to the third world. They're going to take him with them there. They're going to teach people in the third world how we do things in America and help them learn something. What are some things that people in those situations in the third world, poor people, have to teach us?
That's a great question, Kevin, because I think you're right. So often we think we're going to help them, but these are not people with needs as much as they are people made in God's image with great assets, and they have a lot to teach us. And so in my book, Unpoverty, each chapter is a different lesson that I'm learning from these people, and one of them is on faith. We have so many backups to our backups. We think of God when everything else is kind of used up. The poor, they start out every day wondering where today's meal is going to come from, and so God is a very practical part of their daily journey. I learn about gratitude from these folks, too. It's amazing what little they have and yet how grateful they are for it. I learn about relationships from them. These people live in community. They depend upon each other, whereas we sort of build these fences around our houses to protect our possessions and our privacy, and in the meanwhile, instead of building bridges, we build walls.
I love the story you tell in the book, Mark, where you say how all of us have the weed eater, the lawnmower, the blower, and all this stuff. And in a poor community, they would each own one lawn tool and share it with each other.
That's right.
Because they're so used to having to rely on each other.
They might be on to something there.
We're talking to Mark Lutz about his book, Unpoverty, on Kevin and Taylor in the Morning on 104.7 The Fish. Now, I picture you, Mark, maybe being at a party and people find out what you do for a living and that you work with the poor. I would imagine you tell a story about somebody specific when you are talking to someone here in the U.S. who has the impression that the poor or are lazy or not interested in providing for their families. Whose story do you usually tell?
There's one woman that comes to mind, Lola from the Philippines. Lola means grandmother, but that was the only name I knew her by. I went into her little hovel. She shared this little room with 5 other people made of just scraps of metal and wood, gunny sack and what have you. I couldn't even stand up in this room. It was so tiny. And this woman who at 72 should be enjoying retirement after working her whole life, but in the Philippines for poor people like this, there are no safety nets. So when you retire, if you don't work, you don't eat. It's just pretty simple. And her little enterprise was making lanterns because in her community, blackouts were regular. So people had these little oil lanterns, and she'd make them out of jam jar or something. And she'd sell them for 10 cents to 25 cents a piece, depending on the size of them. She'd paint the lid red, cut a hole in it, put a little rope in it for a wick, fill it with oil, and she'd make these little metal straps around it. I still have one that she made for me that day, and it sits on my desk, reminding me of this remarkable woman. She had received her loan of $50, and I thought, gosh, what could this woman have done for $50? She seemed so happy, so content. And then she explained to me how that every day, the first few hours of the day, she'd spend going around to all her neighbors, scavenging through their garbage from the night before, find these old used jars, and she'd sit in this little trough and clean them up, and then several hours later begin making her little lanterns that she'd then hoped to sell for enough to buy her one meal for the day. But with her $50 loan, she had an arrangement with the recycling company, and they would deliver periodically to her doorstep freshly cleaned jars and beginner process.
Neat.
So that's what $50 meant to her.
I love it.
Mark, if you could encourage everybody that's listening right now to really get involved with opening their hearts and then opening their wallets to people. And a lot of us fall into this trap of thinking, well, I'm not Bill Gates.
Right.
I can't make a huge difference. Does it really make a difference if somebody can give $10 or $20?
It does, Kevin, because just like that woman I was telling about, Lola, her loan was $50. It transformed her life. And a few months later, she'd had paid it back, and then we loaned that out to somebody else. That's $50, cost of a dinner.
That's what I love about Opportunity International, and that's why my husband Glenn and I have been involved so long, is you give your money and then you know it's going to be recycled over and over and over again to help different people once they pay the loan back.
Precisely.
Awesome.
And they have so much dignity when they pay that back. You know, when you take something that's a handout, you exchange a piece of your dignity for that. But when you pay it back, it's a loan, and 6 months later, you've paid it all back and somebody else is using, your self-esteem goes sky high. And you're able to do so much more.
That's awesome. Well, the book again is Unpoverty, Rich Lessons from the Working Poor by Mark Lutz. And Mark, thank you so much for being on the show today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin and Taylor, so much.